my career as a lion started, let's say, this morning, when I kind of disguised to be a good guide to a group of very famous international journalist students, those guys. And I think my career as a lion will be finished somehow in the night, so at 1600, 1700, and I will redisguise as a real king, the camera king of RTL. I started my career more than almost 30 years ago while training in a little company in Bonn. I started as a kind of assistant, and then I became a cameraman. And before, I was in the army and got my first contact to the TV business because my father kind of founded the army television in Germany. And so up from the age of, let's say, 5 or 6 years, I somehow was connected to people who had something to do with TV, who worked in TV. The first impact, so actually it was my father, who was in this business, never wanted me to go in the business. He said, well, learn something real. And I actually did my first film in the age of 11 when I made something like a cowboy movie. But when I became a man, I was a kind of shy and anxious that somebody will find it. So I kind of destroyed it, and now I'm very unhappy because nowadays I would like to have it to prove that even at the age of 11 I wasn't a bad cameraman. My first camera was a big TV camera. Actually, it was an old Bosch KCA something. At those times, cameras didn't include the media where you were recording on. So this means my assistant, he had to carry a real huge kind of tape recording machine. And my camera, it had the weight of round about 13, even more, perhaps 15, 16, 17 kilos. And this tape recording machine was around about 15 to 20 kilos, so at this time equipment was really heavy. Then, of course, the times of evolution in camera began, and I think after 3 or 5 years in business, I had my first camera with a tape thing in it, so you could insert the tape directly into the camera and record directly on the tape. And your assistant only had to carry the sound mixer and the microphones and the extra batteries and lights. And so this was a kind of advantage. And later it became smaller and smaller. The minimization of equipment was very small. And nowadays I have the choice between shooting a documentary on one of those modern DSLR photo cameras, or to try a small video camera which records on any kind of chips, sticks, memory sticks, and so on. So you can use micro cameras in your pro work because it comes to, let's say, stories where you cannot have a visible camera at all. This means sometimes we are doing those kind of investigating stories, and then we have a kind of special equipment where we mount a camera into, as something, It can be in a box of cigarettes, and so the smallest lens sizes we use are just, like this, very small, and it's in HDV, and it's a good quality. For example, sometimes we are shooting for a series where people all over the world have problems with their vacation. This means we have a guy in our TV station who kind of solves these problems. This means they call him and we are flying there. And so we first have to show that there is a problem with their vacation. So, for example, they have paid all the bill for their for their holiday, but the quality of the hotel, which should be, let's say, 3-star hotel, has only the quality of a 1-star hotel. And so to prove to the audience that the hotel is really bad, we have to use small cameras to show this. But if we would come with big TV cameras, everybody would prevent us working there, or they won't show us the reality. And so first, when we come in, we film with very small cameras. This can be a DSLR, this can be even a smaller camera, this can be a cell phone, so a handy camera. And afterwards, we come back with a big camera and do what we call the confrontation. With news, it comes to a certain extent that the picture itself, it's not important because of its beauty, but because of showing the action. So a good advantage, for example, was the tsunami after the earthquake last year in Japan. At those times, the pictures you could see in TV were mostly made by handy videos, so I don't know, with the iPhone or other cameras of your cell phone, and they were so impressive that, for example, big productions like Lucas Productions or Hollywood Productions couldn't have made them better. But they all were, for example, to a certain extent, not in focus, and the color wasn't okay, and the resolution wasn't HD, it was not high quality, but people were not interested because the themes of the picture, they were so horrifying and so brutal, but so intense, emotionally so intense, that no professional cameraman was needed in that time. For example, after 1 year, if you're shooting a story 1 year after something, or for example, 10 years after 9/11, of course you need a pro cameraman and you need a real camera which can produce wonderful depths of field and wonderful colors and wonderful pictures, because you're in competition with other people who are shooting those stories too. But again, if just something happens, so a real news story happens. Remember those days when the Concorde, I don't know if remember the plane Concorde, but if this plane came down, the video was made by chance, by a private filmer. It was completely out of focus. You only could see something going down and a ball of fire around, but it was nothing. It wasn't a brilliant or sharp or good picture, but it was the picture. And those pictures for news stories are really the pictures people want to see. I have a special opinion or special mind on this because I'm not a fan of shooting pictures after the action has happened and a kind of pretending it was in this time. So sometimes we are shooting those kind of pictures, but we always make sure that we write down it's not real. We afterwards kind of set up this picture situation. For me, the power of picture is sometimes a little bit more intense, because what you can do is, even if you don't have the picture of the exact event happening, you, for example, interview somebody and then show some other pictures, not directly related to the event, but dealing with the scene. So, for example, if you remember about a plane crash, if you don't have the pictures of a plane crash, you can show a lot of pictures about, I don't know, airports and people who are going to check in and trying to fly and so on, because, of course, everybody can imagine how brutal pictures can be, and there's no need to show brutal pictures at all. For example, in my mind, there's no need to show a dead man's or dead woman's face in TV. Even if it's a brutal news story, you don't have to show it, because this is a kind of privacy I give to those people who suffer in those actions. And so I never showed dead people's faces, and it worked out fine. Because if you, for example, remember Hitchcock, yeah, the famous author of some very thrilling crime movies, he never showed brutal actions directly. He just showed pictures which make you believe you see everything, but you in reality didn't see anything. You can show the brutalness of an action like a war or the influence on people, just, for example, by showing the people who survived. If you ever have seen a picture of small children who sit shivering in a corner, and they are, of course, shivering because they have seen or get used to this kind of brutality. And this, for me, is sometimes much more brutal, and it a kind of not educates, but gives people the chance to say, oh yeah, and we have to do something in future. So for those children, that actions like wars and bomb attacks and whatever may not affect them in future times.